What's up? 42. Probably be a couple months and I'll do a video about, for lack of a better term, African American family. And before that, maybe in a week's time or less, I'm going to do a crowdfunding campaign to promote a movie script. There is a lack of power. One of my favorite movies, Godfather Part 2, had a scene where Frank Pentangeli is testifying in Congress against Michael Corleone and just the extended Godfather family. This is Godfather Part 2 after Godfather's dead. And he's signed an affidavit. He's going to testify. The Senate is all hyped. They got somebody to take down Michael Corleone. And then Michael Corleone, his attorney, who is like his adopted brother, they show up with Frank Pentangeli's real brother. And Pentangeli sees this, and he knows that that these guys will torture and kill his brother. And he completely changes his tune. And, to paraphrase what he was saying, he was basically out there saying, I said Michael Corleone did this and Michael Corleone did that. I was just saying what they wanted to hear. I don't really know the guy. Yeah, okay. I did used to run molasses with his father, but I don't know of any of this Godfather criminal stuff. He completely changed his story. Take me back to prison. I don't care how I'm punished. Punish me for perjury. Because he knew the alternative was his brother was getting it. So what I've noticed recently is the critics of Black Lives Matter are not afraid of Black Lives Matter. But they're happy to criticize because it allows them to get a little love by criticizing Black people by proxy of the word Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives Matter was really assassinating people, would people really stand up and talk about them like this? If they really had that violent hand control, if they were really the mafia, and it gets to the point where there's this former Black Panther who was criticizing Black Lives Matter, and he starts talking about minimum wage laws, and I'm like, okay. The Maine minimum wage law was passed in a state, and I was there to see it, that really doesn't have a high population of Black people. And there were some complex reasons. I mean, you could break down, or analyze, I should say, inflation and the cost of everything in comparison to minimum wage and make a sensible case that 15 an hour in the city of Seattle or the city of New York or the city of Washington, D.C. is just keeping in pace with everything else. It's really not going to cause a job or employment to change or anything like that. But I've noticed that a lot of this comes from Black conservatives who don't think for themselves. They just basically regurgitate whatever. And okay, if you want to get your conservative thing on, that's cool. I'm not in favor of all these abortion clinics in the hood. There's enough resources to feed people. I'll chew tobacco. I'm okay with melanated people having guns when there's a history of sabotage, when they really get things going for themselves. Okay. You can do your conservative thing, but think for yourself, analyze. Because if you really study Black Lives Matter, and I understand that they weren't vetted, and we see that one of their main guys, D-Ray, who's running for mayor, is a homosexual, and Black people, Black men specifically, they are promoted more often, or maybe not necessarily more often, but there's a history where you can get promoted by being feminine, even if you're not homosexual. If you're willing to put a little ruffle on, cross your legs and not, I don't know. I could just point to people after people after people, from Little Richard to that rapper ASAP, who's another critic of Black Lives Matter. It's, if you're willing to tuck yourself, and I call this damn, it's getting windy. Wind chimes are pumping. I call this the sidekick syndrome. If you're willing to have that sidekick syndrome, and it works, people get promoted like this. Tim McGinty and Eva Alvarez. That to me is what Black Lives, because I had to look, what has Black Lives Matter done? I don't care so much who they're funded by, because, George Soros George, Boros DeBoer, I don't care. It's what do you do? And so far, Black Lives Matter really hasn't done much politically. They got rid of Tim McGinty, because he's the dude that couldn't prosecute the cop that did the drive-by on I think it was 14-year-old Tamir Rice. Anita Alvarez, who, with that Laquan McDonald case and other cases, I think 60 Minutes did something on her. 2 Democrats. And they came up with a manifesto that might have prevented the murder of Alton Sterling Philando and the vigilante justice against the 6 cops, or 7 or 8, that were killed since then. And like I said, D-Ray's running for mayor. And that's pretty much all they've done. From Michael Brown, where you got viscerally courted witnesses, like unplanned witnesses walking around with their hands up, imitating him after he was killed, to Charles Kinsey, who was laying there with his hands up. There's an issue. People aren't going to be terrorized. Black Lives Matter is a response to terrorism. It's not, it could become more than that, but for now, let's call it what it is. And people are jumping in on them with these fake paper tiger arguments about what they're not, whether it's rappers like Gates, who's a good rapper, ASAP, who's big, Alex Jones, Bill O'Reilly, the Donald Trump mammies, Diamond and Silk. To me, it's all about power. You've got a better chance of choking on candy than getting choked by a cop. But if too many people start choking on candy, the country at large will do something about those candies. It'll say, hey, that candy is dangerous. People choke. But if you get choked by a cop, nobody does anything. We're really in a system where, like what happened with Eric Garner, choked by a cop, whatever. Nobody's punished. People aren't going to be terrorized. For the common dude, they say what they want to say on their YouTube channel, whatever. But for the Larry Elders, the Charles Barkleys, all these pastors, I'm not talking about the Trump mammies, Diamond and Silk, but I'm, for the black conservatives that have a little bit of money and a little bit of influence, to paper tiger Black Lives Matter is speaking from a position of weakness, because true strength would be to buy them. And yeah, it's true. And let's not assume that this is about, that this is more than it is. Black Lives Matter was in response to police brutality. They didn't get together with a bunch of sociologists and break down what's really wrong with African Americans. And I would say, I could name 3 things. Everything is connected to those 3 things. Family, worthless churches, and never do anything about the human rights violations, i.e. never asking an organized call for reparations. Those 3 things. So if you're a black conservative and you're not a bitch, because like I said, I get my conservative thing on. I like a little bit of that honky tonk music, some of that bluegrass. To me, that's better than country. Some twang, chew some tobacco here and there. And I'm not talking about white conservatives. I'm not talking about integrationists, because I don't expect them to do anything. I used to be more of a conservative than I am, because I used to listen to a lot of conservative radio, and I don't expect them to do it. I've heard enough. I don't expect them to do anything. And truth be told, I don't really expect the black conservatives to do anything. But I just want to point out that if at this point in 2016 you feel the need to criticize black people by using, Black Lives Matter as a sort of proxy to do that, you would be better off just begging the white people, because nothing's gonna happen from that. Your criticism is nothing's gonna happen from it. Maybe you personally might get a little bit of love, like if you're Tommy Sotomayor, you might get a few more thousand views. If you're Larry Elder, your radio show might get a little bit more. But the reality is, it's not power. Power is buying them. As a political organization, sure, family is more of a problem. You could buy Black Lives Matter and change it to Black Family Matters, Black Fathers Matter, and control it. But really, you're obviously, because they don't even talk like this. They talk from the position of the sidekick. You're in no better standing to do that than they are to buy you. You will sooner see George Soros buy Black conservatives and talk and pay them to speak against police brutality than you will see Black conservatives put their money together and buy Black Lives Matter and redirect them to something that would move the needle more for African Americans as a whole. Because I would agree, family matters a lot more than police brutality, but you got to be intellectually honest and understand that people are not going to be terrorized. From Michael Brown having viscerally, recorded witnesses walking around saying, that he was not an effing threat, or he had it was a white dude walking around, he had his effing hands up, all that. And they're seeing the same thing as the majority of witnesses, and this information was released and there was no trial, to Charles Kinsey laying there getting shot with his hands up. There's a problem. Philando Castile, we're watching a man bleed out and die. Alton Sterling, we're watching a dude get wrestled down, held down. Police are yelling gun like Godzilla came out of the water as an excuse to shoot him. People are not going to be terrorized, because yeah, it's true that terrorism isn't the main thing that's holding America back as a whole. An Islamic terrorist isn't going to kill you before heart disease and stuff like that. People understand that, but we're not going to be terrorized. So there's going to be a response to that. Black Lives Matter was a response, and they came up with guidelines to deal with the race soldiering. And instead of because look, and I'm not expecting anything from Black conservatives, because I don't think they care enough. I don't think they're intelligent enough to do anything. But if they were, then they would come in there and say, hey, we're going to help you deal with some of these laws. They would, because there was a Republican, Black Republican, I think from South Carolina, who was talking about how often he's racially profiled and how often he's pulled over. A guy like him could come in and help get some of these laws changed, because they had sensible laws that would have addressed some of this and might have prevented some of these murders, that might have prevented these vigilante retaliations, all these cops that have gotten killed in the last month or so. And then said, okay, now that I'm working with these people, I'm going to put some money in and focus on some things that'll really move the needle. But I don't expect them to do it, because we've had Black conservatives, be it intelligent ones, Thomas Sowell and all that. They don't do this stuff. They don't think in terms of power. They think in terms of being a sidekick, begging for the butter biscuits. And that's why we've had regressive child support laws since 1975. Nobody has changed these laws. Yet cops have already changed body camera laws. More money, less fatherhood. That's how child support works. That's why I call it regressive. Dudes start selling dope so they won't get garnished. That's broken. That's not addressed. Body camera laws have already been changed. And they're not speaking the language of the power of power. Integrationalists, I saw this integrationalist video where a bunch of different people came out speaking against social justice warriors, and I'm thinking, okay, and? Do you realize these people are ignorant? They're not sociologists. They are responding to terrorism. And instead of helping them get some of these laws and get this settled and then working with some stuff that moves the needle, you're bitching just like they're bitching. And what does that accomplish? Seeing this from Black pastors, and I researched some of these Black pastors. There's this one dude, he founded Stand America. And I'm looking at what they do, and they're just, like I said, the second thing that's wrong with African Americans is they have worthless temples, aka churches, aka mosques, that don't do anything. And his organization ain't doing nothing. So he's as big of a problem. Well, he is a problem. Black Lives Matter is mostly solution, and they got a lot of internet trolls and all that and whatever, but they're at least recommending solutions. Maybe you can criticize them for not getting stuff on the ballot, for not being out there humping with the clipboards, trying to get signatures to change laws. You know, it's easier to write a manifesto than actually get people out there trying to change laws. Criticize them for that, but if you really want to move the needle with stuff, you're part of the problem if you're a pastor in America. If D-Ray is a lousy mayor, bring that down. And I don't expect anything from white conservatives. Bill O'Reilly says he wants to put Black Lives Matter out of business. Okay. Kevin Gates, Charles Barkley, Larry Elder, all these pastors, the sap rapper, and there's a whole bunch of other examples I could give. I don't expect anything from them too, because they have that, they're not thinking in terms of moving the needle power. I don't think they want to. The black conservative is right there with the civil rights activists in the sense that they don't think in terms of dominance, they think in terms of equality. And when you think in terms of equality, you're playing a game fighting for a tie against other people who are fighting for a win. You're basically the same crab in the barrel. Speaking mostly to that young conservative that's kind of like I used to be. That you chew that tobacco or whatever. You're about changing, moving the needle by addressing the family. Stop thinking like the sidekick and start fighting for dominance. And if you're fighting for dominance and you're thinking, how can we get some money together and refocus Black Lives Matter? And instead of just creating these paper tiger issues to criticize them for, so you can get a little bit more street cred with people who have lighter skin. Instead of doing that, you pull your money together, you help them to get a good rapport, get some of these race soldier or anti-race soldier laws on the books to cut into the way the police unions will defend blatant murderers, in-your-face murderers. And then you would refocus them on issues, then move the needle. But again, I don't expect them to do it. That's why I'm talking to this younger centrists, or just black people in general that are young and don't have that strong sidekick gene, equality fighter gene. I'm talking to the dominance fighter gene, the power gene,